I'm glad to be here, everyone. I want to start off with a little joke I heard from some App Inventor programmers, and they're making fun of Java programmers. It goes like this: what does a Java programmer take on a first date? The answer is, what date? They're still working on their program in the computer lab. So that's the Java programmer. Now the Java programmers, their retort is, what does an App Inventor programmer take on a first date? You might think like blocks or something like that, but no, that's not it. The answer to that one is, what date? The App Inventor programmers are kindergartners, so they don't go on dates. Sorry. So that's the end of our screencast today, folks. No. Anyway, I want to introduce myself. Let me switch the slide over here. I'm Dave Wolbridge. So I teach at USF, and I've been teaching beginners for a long time. But this is my third year teaching App Inventor, and I teach it to business students, humanities students, not computer science students typically. They are scared of math, and that's typically why they take my course, because they can get their math requirement out of the way. Anyway, I've been working with the App Inventor team a little bit, mostly giving them feedback from my students and stuff I think about and learn, ideas for how the tool could progress over the last couple of years. I'm the author of some of the advanced tutorials on the App Inventor site, and then we took some of those tutorials and a bunch of other ones and a bunch of other material, and we wrote the book App Inventor, Create Your Own Android Apps. And my co-authors there are three folks from the App Inventor team: Hal Abelson, Spertus and Liz Looney. I got an O'Reilly video series, if you're interested, which is kind of some screencasts walking through App Inventor, and you can get to all my stuff from appinventor.org and appinventorblog.com. So, one reason for this today, is there's been some big news about App Inventor, and on August 8th or around there, a dark cloud descended on the App Inventor enthusiasts, at least. And there was actually two parts of the announcement. One is Google discontinues App Inventor, and the other part of it was they open sourced it. And I put those on two separate lines, because the first one is not a good thing, and it's certainly kind of slowed down things and really scared a lot of people. Especially App Inventor's a cloud tool, right? So you can only use it from the Google server. You can't download it to your computer and use it on your own. And so it scared people that the fact that Google would not be supporting it. And a lot of the headlines that came out, they lost the part that it would be discontinued at the end of the year and just said it's discontinued. So that even added to it. The open source part of it's great, but that announcement really scared some people, and it certainly was upsetting. But about a week later, the sun came back out, and I thought was fantastic news is they announced that MIT will open a Center for Mobile Learning. So Hal Abelson, kind of the founder of App Inventor, and a couple other guys, Mitch Resnick and Eric Klopfer from MIT, are going to run this center, and they will take over App Inventor, and Google is going to fund that. So kind of this changed the whole way people looked at this. So in some sense, App Inventor was incubated at Google, which was great, and they did fantastic work, built this system, and now it's going back more into the open source climate at MIT and an educational climate. So I think this is fantastic news, and we'll talk more about exactly what's going to happen as we proceed. So kind of what I want to do, and I want to get a lot of discussion going, and we'll have time at the end as well for questions. But I want to tell you, why I think App Inventor is important, then go over some history, talk about what's going to happen over the next 6 months, and then some of the directions for some of the open source ideas people are having, and like I said, to have a lot of discussion at the end. kind of my first way I like to introduce App Inventor is with this program, and I hope you can see these blocks okay. To me, these blocks are like the hello world of App Inventor. And in fact, the first day of class, I show, my students don't build this the first day of class, but I show them these blocks the first day of class. And kind of what I think is wonderful about it is, it's very visual blocks. They're very understandable. It's a high-level library that we're using here. It's an event-based language. So that kind of makes this code a lot more understandable than you might look at it if it was Java code or Python, something like that. So it's kind of easy to understand. And I hope folks can kind of take a look at this and see, if you haven't looked at it, figure out what it does. Usually with some question answers, my students kind of get at least get thinking about what this thing is doing. And the important thing, I think, is these blocks are phone blocks, right? So there's a lot of blocks languages, but they're, this is not for doing robotics or anything like that. This is for doing real-world stuff. And in fact, this simple app actually, has some meaning in the real world, some utility. And one of my students wrote it the first semester I taught this, and what he called it was no text while driving. And the idea is, this app, when a text comes in, it kind of auto-responds to it. It's like an answering machine for text. And so when the text comes in, or if you're driving in the car, you can set your phone next to you and make sure you don't try to text while you're driving, and this thing will speak the text out loud and send back a message to whoever who texted you. So pretty cool stuff, very simple, and kind of the big idea here is we're combining this great visual language with functionality, which has so much meaning to people now because they love their phones, and mobile apps are such a huge thing today. So it really connects with my students, and I also think it connects with just a lot of people out there who love their phones and want to control them. So anyway, if any of you are programmers or computer scientists, think about the first programs you wrote in school if you went to school 10 or 20 years ago or even 5 years ago. They typically did not do such cool stuff. Newly empowered creators. So I just want to talk about some of the success stories. There's this group of people, I don't think anybody can really characterize them. They're a group that never existed before, right? All these people that were kind of shut out of building apps or writing software, and certainly for building mobile apps, all of a sudden it's possible. Bloggers, designers, kids, anyway, who knows? All kinds of people who now can build apps, and I think I look at it as like, the blogging tools that came out, 5-10 years ago, the web tools that have come out, that let people create, kind of static stuff, but really changed, who could produce stuff or information on the web. But now this is a whole new thing, right? We're talking about interactive apps, and kind of ordinary non-nerd computer science people, programmers can now join the game. And I think what's interesting is, I think most people, certainly my students, have never dreamed of doing this kind of stuff. It doesn't even, the fact that they could write software for their university, for their phone, just has, it never has occurred to them. So I think that's one reason why, we've got to tap into this group and expand the group and let people know this is possible. Just a few examples of success stories that App Inventor has helped. So the Youth Radio's Mobile Action Lab is in Oakland. They serve young people, underrepresented groups. They've won awards with the apps these guys have built. They've built apps for the market. App Inventor has really helped these guys take off and get people excited about technology. So check their stuff out. It's really, really cool. Kind of one of the more popular groups, this is an after-school program, the Technovation Challenge. It's high school girls. They come 2 nights a week for like 3-4 hours a night and work with mentors, college women from that are at university now, and also young professionals in the field, and they basically, it's not just programming, it's innovation, it's entrepreneurship. They do business plans, but the cool thing is App Inventor lets them also build prototypes and actually do some of the tech part and the creation part and combine that with kind of the business part. And it really, really is. If you ever get a chance to go to like the pitch nights these young ladies do, it's one of the most inspiring things I've ever seen. And I think App Inventor is a tool that has really, really helped this take off. If you haven't heard about this project, it's really cool. A friend of mine is Ralph Morelli. He's at Trinity College, and he's got his students working with a nonprofit, an NGO in Haiti. And they've gone over there, and they've also built some software for them using App Inventor and some other tools. But what a great thing that college students can actually do real stuff to help people. So I think it's a fantastic experience for those students. Finally, and I'm going to show you a little movie on our USF experience. We've had great success, in a number of ways. One way is in the past, our CS0 course, it's like I said, it's for students that are kind of afraid of math, and very rarely have we had kind of students go on, to other CS courses. And we used to teach Lego Mindstorm robots. We've done web stuff, and students like it. It's cool, but really with App Inventor, I think we tap into something else where they can see kind of a real utility for the stuff they're building, and they can see how they might change their life and use technology and even get a job in technology. So I've had last semester, I think it was 11 students who went from CS0 and then continued in computer science. One of the cool things, the young women in the picture there, they became Technovation teachers. So college students, getting fired up about technology, and then being so fired up that they went on to teach young girls about it and serve as role models for them. It's just a fantastic experience in a number of ways. The other thing we do in our school is, now the CS0 students, they get to present along with our seniors and master's students on our CS night. This doesn't make sense because it's never happened before, and the older students get kind of pissed because they're like, why didn't we get to learn this stuff when we were freshmen? But it's great, and the reason is they can build apps that are really cool and that do useful stuff that people want to see. So it's good stuff. Okay, so anyway, I want you to see some of our students. We made a little movie, and a USF student created the movie. So I'm going to try this out. I'm going to click and show you a URL. Our software is not such that we can show it within this main screen, but I want to show you this link. So go ahead and click on this link. It's about a 2-minute movie, and if you can click on it and check it out, I think it's pretty interesting. And we'll just take a break from the main screen, and if everybody can kind of simultaneously check out this movie, and then we'll come back to the regular presentation. I'll do a few more slides, and we'll talk after that. But check out the movie by USF students about our program. So, folks, this is Dave back. I know some people, it looks like some people were able to watch the clip, some people not. The URL, and I'm putting it into the group chat as well. It's you can get to it at appinventor.org movie, and Yasmina just put the link in. So if you get a chance, check that out later if you couldn't watch it now. But it's a nice kind of some students talking about their experience in it, and it kind of really gives you a feel for how this can kind of change how people see technology and whatnot. So anyway, I want to continue on, and what I want to do is talk about just first the history, and then talk about where things are going with App Inventor. So we started with a pilot trial in summer 2009, and I visited Google, and Google was great. They gave a few universities 20 phones to start out, which really helps. You can do App Inventor with an emulator or with just a few phones in your classroom, but it was great to start with a bunch of phones. And I found that I was always very interested in visual languages and kind of languages for end users, and so I jumped on this. And I knew my students would love this thing, and especially the fact that they got to program their phones. And for me, I've taught 18 years. I found that motivation is the key. If you can motivate people where they're asking questions and they're kind of driving the learning, that's what really works. So anyway, that pilot was in summer 2009, and we had very successful educational experiences, and in fact, I think this summer things were the momentum was going great education-wise. And the announcement has slowed things down a little bit, but we'll talk about that in a second. The beta opened in the next summer, in July 2010. It was kind of invite only. The Google team got an overwhelming response, and they had to really build up the infrastructure because they weren't expecting hundreds of thousands of people to show up. I think their original intention was education, and all of a sudden they had this kind of roaring lion, this new group of people who were very interested in building apps that weren't necessarily educators or students or anything. Recently, there's been some new features. There's books came out this summer as well. The book that I co-authored, a couple other ones, Jason Tyler's and a German edition, and there's also been a couple more books come out. So there's been great momentum. And then the August announcement came, and that kind of changed things a little bit. Yeah, so we'll talk about, Frank asked a question about hosting AI on a school server, and I'll address that in a second. I definitely think it's possible. I just want to say a couple things about new features in App Inventor. If you haven't visited it recently, definitely check it out. There's now a web component, so you can talk to APIs much easier than you used to. A web view. You can do database stuff and bring in spreadsheets with these things called fusion tables. There's generic components. So App Inventor is a very concrete language, which is great, but they've added features so you can do kind of more reusable components. It's kind of an advanced thing, but it's a very helpful thing. And soon there's going to be an HTML5 blocks editor. So the Java applet blocks editor that comes up now, that'll be all integrated as a regular web tool. So I think that's really cool. And the main thing about this is, App Inventor is coming very close to being a full-featured language. And a lot of software developers are wary of a language which is not full-featured. What limitations does it have? And the App Inventor team has done a fantastic job of continuing to add to the language, and it's pretty close to a full-featured language. Anyway, we'll talk more about that as we go. So a couple of things. Now until the start of 2012, I guess the main piece of information is the App Inventor team has to transform the code before they can get it up at MIT and before they can open source it. Right? It's got a bunch of Google dependencies. So Google infrastructure. I've been told it was designed very well, so the transition is going to be reasonable, but it's still a big task. And what they got to do is basically make it so it can run not within the proprietary Google world. And so I think that's going to be the main focus. You're probably not going to see a lot of new features from the App Inventor team in these next months, but you will see this, their focus will be, rebuilding the system so it can run at MIT and elsewhere. For App Inventor developers, until the end of the year, continue developing, continue working. You can build apps. The key is make sure you download all your apps, and what I mean the source code on that, And the source code, if you go to the projects page and choose other actions and say download source, and you get a little zip file. And with that zip file, you can bring that back into another App Inventor system later. But you need to make sure you get those on your computer. And Karen Parker of the App Inventor team has announced, they're going to give more instructions later as we go. But that's pretty much going to be what happens. And then the goal is, ideally, and I have confidence that this will happen, is after the start of the year, you can upload all your apps back into the new stable MIT version. That's the goal, at least. Okay, so education-wise, and I think educators really like certainty, and certainly these announcements have brought some uncertainty. The fall courses are unaffected because App Inventor will be up for certainly till December 31st. There's some uncertainty come the spring. For me, I'm going to plan to go on as planned. I plan to teach my course in the spring, but I am going to have a backup plan. But I have a lot of confidence in the team. These guys are very dedicated and skilled engineers at Google, the App Inventor team, the 5.2 or however many engineers they have, and they are very dedicated. They've put a lot of time into this, and they want to see App Inventor be successful. So I'm certain that they're going to do the work to get this thing up and ready for us. So I'm hoping to continue in the spring. My backup plan is to have a few modules ready for early in the semester. I do some web stuff, maybe teach some Scratch, and if there is a week or a few days of slowdown, I'll be prepared for that. But my expectation, and I start like January 24th my semester, my expectation will be to teach as usual. I think in the meantime, there's a great community out here of teachers and user group people, and we all have some of the same goals. Let's connect collect all this stuff, right? Let's organize things, continue to build tutorials, continue to build movies, and make this a very collaborative community where people can learn and teach and all that stuff. I think there's also great potential for the high school curriculum. Ralph Morelli, David Jansen, Jeff Gray from University of Alabama, Michelle Hutton, who's at Stanford and a post-chair of the CSTA. These are all folks working on this new high school curriculum, because the high schools are going through a big change, and there's computing principles idea, and this idea is let's get away, or not away, but let's have something besides just the Java stuff that they do in high school, because that hasn't been working for a lot of students. It works for some, and I think App Inventor could be a big part of the new high school curriculum, and I think 2012 is a big place where that could really take off. Somebody asked about junior colleges. I don't know. I definitely know middle schools, high schools, four-year universities. I'm sure there's junior colleges out there that teach App Inventor, but I'm not sure. Someone asked about the best App Inventor book on O'Reilly. I would say that's the one by Dave Wolber and others. No, there's a couple great books. There's one by Jason Tyler out, and there's some new ones out. Ralph Roberts is the author of another one. I really like the book we did. What it has is a combination of tutorials that the students can step through, or whoever's learning can step through. And then we've got another subsection which is more traditional, like a traditional computer science concepts book. Like you would teach those chapters and kind of interweave the chapters, where you first go walk through a tutorial, and then you kind of get the conceptual side of it. So anyway, that's what that book does. I want to talk a little bit about the open source part of this transition. One thing is this code will not be available immediately, right? So the Google team's got to do that transitional coding, So you could see, I think, sometime near the end of the year or past the end of the year, the first kind of available access to it. I think there's great academic and commercial potential for it. Some years ago, in fact, I did my PhD research in visual languages and programming by example. There was a lot of innovation in visual languages. There hasn't been a lot in maybe the last decade. There's been some, but I could see this open sourcing of App Inventor really helping that kind of innovation along. And the basic goal being, let's figure out a way where everybody can join this, and have the ability to create interactive apps. It's a tough problem. I've been thinking about it a long time, but App Inventor goes a long ways to doing it, and there's, in Scratch, and there's a lot of languages and a lot of ways you can tackle it. So anyway, it's very interesting. Cross-platform development, and this might be part of like a professional version that maybe is even separate from the MIT open source version. And I think the idea here is you could build iPhone apps, you could build HTML5, container apps, you could build web apps, you could build any kind of stuff using the blocks language, and not just Android. So pretty good stuff. I just want to talk a little bit. There's the idea of a dual view system. If you're not familiar with it, some folks, the App Inventor and some guys at University of Alabama, Jeff Gray and Joshua Swank, there's now a library of Java code called the Java Bridge, and the idea is that library is the Java equivalent to all the blocks and components on App Inventor. Right, so you could see the blocks in App Inventor and side by side see the Java code is the idea. And Joshua Swank is writing a code generator, so you take your App Inventor app and it will generate that Java code for you. I think this has great potential, both for education, right, for a student to be able to make that bridge from visual to regular code, and also, for developers. I think for a professional tool, what you really want is the ability to get down to the lower level code so there's no limitations. So you can do whatever you want for sure. And I think a lot of developers look at a visual language and say, forget it, I'm not going to do it because I don't want to come to some roadblock where I'm stuck and the language doesn't let me do what I want to do. But with an App Inventor / Java combination, something like a Dreamweaver for apps, right, where you can see both the lower level code and the high level code, I think that would be a fantastic tool, and you'd get more software developers that joined in. Kind of finally, I just want to say a little bit about community and sharing. It surprises me sort of that App Inventor's done so well because they don't have a gallery. They don't have a sharing part of the system. It was always on the roadmap, but never got done. There has been some user group folks that built one. Anthony Barnes has led a system, and with Gary Fredrickson helping. So it's the TAIR, the AI repository. Check that one out. You can upload projects to that and see other projects there. It's really cool. But what's really needed is an integrated sharing environment, right? One reason Scratch at MIT has been so successful is as you build apps, part of the tool is I'm going to share that. That's just part of the culture. And it's just a great way because then you can program by example, right? You can grab somebody else's app and customize it and go from what they have, and that's a great way to learn. Anyway, there's a project, Fred Martin and Daryl Lippman at University of Massachusetts are leading it. We're involved at USF a little bit. We're building the mobile gallery for it, so it's that'll be kind of an Android market alternative, kind of the market for customizable apps. And there's also Lynn Turbach is leading the Wellesley College folks who are helping with that. Anyway, I think it's this has the potential to be one of the greatest open source sharing environments if the new environment has an integrated sharing site. And Mitch Resnick from MIT, who's joining the team, is a director of the new center. He led this Scratch sharing environment, building that, and so his experience is going to be fantastic for making that happen. Anyway, I'd love to answer folks' questions. So I'll try to check some of the ones that are there, but please add some more, and as best we can, let's try to have a discussion here. But I'm going to start at least from the top of my screen. Are there any plans to develop App Inventor for tablets? I think it's a great question. That comes from Barry. We got a grant from Google, a Google Rise grant, and we bought some tablets for this semester, and so I've got some Galaxy tabs, and I've got students building apps on that right now. And you have to do a couple, a little bit to make them show up correctly on the tablet, but you can build apps on it for right now. Now, I'm not sure if that's, I guess there's building apps for it, but there's also, is there a tool that you could use to build the apps on, so not build apps for the tablet, but build apps on the tablet? I think that would be another great direction for the open source tool. Because one great thing about App Inventor is it's drag and drop. There's not a lot of typing, and so it would be a natural place to actually build apps on the tablet. So if you got some money and you want to start a business, I think that's a great way to go. Let's see. How might App Inventor complement Scratch or cross-pollinate between communities? That's from Michael. Great question. I think that's one of the fantastic things about this move is all the knowledge that the Scratch folks have can now be applied to this other tool. So sharing between those communities, but also, man, they've really done it over there with Scratch, especially the community stuff. And I think they'll be able to apply that to App Inventor. So, Scratch is not just for kids, but in some sense, we're going to see how this all works in more of an adult and mobile phone way. So I think it's very, very interesting to see what happens. Okay. Question, any thought on making the execution more visible, like in Scratch where you have the white outline around the executing blocks? That's from Krishnindu. Yeah, I think that App Inventor has some pretty good debugging stuff. So you can do, like execute a block at a time, and you can kind of watch variables, which is really cool. But I think your suggestion there is a good one. It's one thing you can't do is kind of, there's no little pointer that shows you where in the blocks execution is happening. There's no step-by-step. But I think it's an absolutely natural progression for the languages to add more debugging tools, so a person can see the blocks move, and then also, they've got the great connection to a phone where you can see what's happening on the phone, and it would be great to see that and also see the program counter walking through the blocks. I think that's a fantastic idea. Let's see. Will App Inventor ever be available to use offline? That's from Marcus O. I think absolutely that'll be, I think, one of the results from the open sourcing of it is, I think the fact that it's a cloud tool and Google Discontinued it kind of, woke people up to, hey, we need a desktop tool just for our own state of mind. So it'd be great to have a desktop App Inventor tool. And I think when the open source version comes out, we would definitely see somebody taking that and say, let's build this for the desktop. App Inventor in other language is from Miguel. Oh, sorry. Does MIT support hosting mean that the open source will be MIT licensed? That's from Joe P. I'm not an expert on licensing, but I think what Hal told me was it'll be an Apache license, and I'm not sure exactly what that means, but what I thought from our conversation is what he meant is it'll be where you could use it for commercial purposes or for nonprofit purposes. But don't quote me on that. I don't know exactly how that license will come out. But that's the implication I got from when I spoke with Hal about it. Mike, is how soon will App Inventor get an HTML interface so it doesn't rely on Java? I think that's a great question. I saw a demo of the HTML5 version, and it looks fantastic. I can't say. I don't know when it will be put out there, but my guess is it'll be part of the version that comes to MIT because it's really fantastic. But I think we're talking some weeks or maybe a month or two before it's out there. Well, folks, thanks very much for coming and all your great questions. I'm at Wolber at usfca.edu if you'd like to contact me. I'm going to stick around a while on the group chat and here if you want to ask some more questions. Crescendo had a question. Any thoughts on a single window UI like Scratch? I think that when the blocks editor is a regular HTML window instead of a Java blocks, I think that's quite possible. And one thing I would like to see is a little more connection between the visual components and the events on them. Like if anybody's ever used Visual Basic or those tools, one nice thing is you can go to like a button or to some visual object and you can say, okay, show me all the code for that, or show me the code for when an event on that component happens. And I think that would help a little bit as far as people conceptualizing the whole thing. Because right now, you name your visual components in one window, and then in the other window, the blocks editor, you have to find that name and use it. It's not a huge bridge to pass, but I think there could be more connectivity between where it's really a direct way to get from the visual component to the editor. I got another question from Steve. His question is, how will the current items needing work like multi-window be affected by the change? Do you think it'll get done faster or take longer? I think, Steve, I'm not sure by multi-window do you mean the HTML blocks editor? Or do you mean that there's also another issue, which is making it easier to do multi-screen apps, which I think maybe that's what you're talking about. But in general, I think all the feature additions that have been talked about that we were expecting are probably going to be slowed down dramatically for the next, until the start of the year. I think the engineers are going to be, focusing on transitioning it, getting rid of the Google infrastructure, and making the App Inventor that exists now work at MIT or elsewhere. I think that's in the short term. Definitely the innovation and the new features is going to slow down in App Inventor. But maybe in the long term, after the open source version comes out and we get multiple teams working on it, you could see an explosion of new tools and new features. Because one thing about the Google App Inventor team is it was very small. They're a very talented group, but at least in my opinion, Google did not put a lot of they did not add resources very much to that group, unfortunately, and so they did a great job and they built a great system. But if we could have 500 people working on different features, wow, who knows? Gary's asking me to shamelessly plug the Google. Yeah, I will plug the Google Forms. There's some great stuff, great tutorials. If you have any questions as you're learning App Inventor, you definitely want to go to appinventorbeta.com/forum. And also the TAIR site, which is TAIR, TAIR.info. And you will find those are the places to start as you walk through and learn App Inventor. There's just so much stuff, both for beginners, and then as you get into it, a lot of the folks on TAIR, they are the App Inventor repository. They're doing very advanced stuff, talking to APIs, really complex apps with App Inventor as a basis, but also using kind of web components to help. Will the open source version allow us to use the physical buttons with App Inventor? Barry, can you? I'm not sure what you mean by that. Can you clarify? So Barry's question is, will the open source version allow physical buttons with App Inventor? Until I hear back from Barry, I'll take Takaki's question. Can I join open source App Inventor committee? I have enough skill. Absolutely. I think what's going to happen is near the start of this year, the open source version will become accessible to folks, and then I think what you'll see is a number of universities, maybe some startups. I think you'll see a number of groups start taking that and building new things with it. So definitely send me email, and if the time comes, I can try to hook you up with somebody that's gonna work with the open source code, or take it yourself and go. I think this is a great opportunity. Okay, sorry, Barry. So the actual, gotcha. So Barry, that's a great question. Barry asked about the actual physical buttons on the phone. And, in general, I think the App Inventor right now, you don't have access, number one, to some Android functionality. Like, for instance, you can't change what happens when some of the menus get clicked. And you certainly can't change, like Barry's mentioning, what happens when, say, someone clicks on the, what's it called, like the settings for an app. You don't have access to that stuff. And I haven't explored it deeply, how possible that is, how much flexibility there is within Android, but I know there's certainly more flexibility than the current App Inventor gives. So I think, for instance, in a professional version of App Inventor, I think those are the kind of limitations that such a version would want to get rid of, and allow people to build anything and not be kind of limited in that way. So I think that's a great question. Marcus is asking, will it ever be possible to work on one AI project with two or more people at the same time? Yeah, great question, Marcus. And I think you definitely want to distinguish between kind of inherent problems with the system and just kind of problems that are there because there wasn't enough time to add these features. And certainly kind of group work, which you find in most Google tools, the collaborative nature of most new tools, especially Google tools, is fantastic. And the App Inventor did not have that, and that's only because they had a list of stuff to do, and they could only do so much. So certainly, the ability to say, okay, I want to share this with my colleagues, and we can all work on these blocks together. I think you'll see that shortly. And my guess is that would have been something done very, in the next few months, except for the fact that what's happened. But I'm certain that that'll be part of it. It's just a matter of implementing it within the system. And I don't. You'd have to ask the App Inventor team, but I don't think that one's a particularly difficult one to implement. Pedro's asking, will it be possible to copy part of the code from one project to another? Another good question. And so Hal Abelson was working on this one directly. This was one of his projects. I don't know what the status is, but he was working on a number of ways to share at the, not the component level, but at the sub-project level, right? Like a way to, in traditional programming, like to build a module and to get that module in other apps. And right now, you have to essentially redo blocks from one app to another to share them, unless you bring a whole app in and start from it. But if you got two things going, there's no easy way to kind of go from one to the other. And once again, this is just kind of it's just kind of a feature that needs to be added. But the nice thing is Hal has given this a lot of thought on how to do it best, and he's got a long history of experience building languages. So I'm sure that feature, when it's added, will be fantastic, and will really help people share and reuse their code between apps. Let's see. Michael L., I'm not sure if it's for me, but he's talking about inexpensive phones that will run App Inventor apps, and he mentions T-Mobile Comet, which is fabulous. That's great. With Macs, most phones you buy will work pretty much out of the box. We've had some problems with Linux machines and Windows machines, not real difficult problems, but you have to deal with drivers and that sort of thing. So the startup can be kind of hard, just when you start using a new phone. So that's the only. I think pretty much every Android phone will work, but you got to make sure you have the right drivers. At least if you're going to do the live testing with App Inventor, where you connect it with a USB cord. Can you explain a little more how it will be possible to extend the available visual components? This comes from Pedro. So how will it be possible to extend the visual components? So one early idea was a component development kit, which the idea would be, and you in Java you write some components and you annotate them in a certain way, and then you say, okay, I want to plug this into App Inventor, and that would be fantastic for developers and even for teachers, right? I would love to say, students, I want to work with Twitter or work with some tool. I want to give you blocks to do it. So I could do the Java code and hook it back into App Inventor. So the idea of a component development kit was definitely on the App Inventor team's game plan from the get-go. But it's since it's not kind of part of building apps, proper, they hadn't got to it. But it's a great idea. Certainly, I think someone will take that on for the open source version. Yeah. Pedro mentioned, it'll be amazing if we do have a component development kit, and I love the idea of making this tool not just for educational purposes, but for development. Because you can do stuff so quickly. It would be great to be able to kind of have the hooks where you don't lack flexibility, but you also have the great visual tools. So yeah, I love it. Okay, so I just want to make sure I didn't miss anybody's question. Anybody have other questions that I'm not seeing here?
All righty, David. It looks like those are all the questions that have come in. At this time, we'd like to say a big thank you to you for your wonderful and informative presentation. I'm sure our students have benefited greatly today. Lots of good questions, folks, from all of you participating today. We really appreciate that. All the questions do add that much more to our webcast, and we greatly do appreciate it. We'd like to remind you, you can visit O'Reilly.com to get David's book. And at this time, the webinar will conclude. Again, thank you, everybody, for joining today, and thank you, David, for a wonderful presentation.